I thought it would just be a no-brainer for most people, and I'm not trying to insult anyone. I know everybody is a hot topic, but it did surprise me.
It continues to be a controversial. I mean, I've been on, for better or for worse, in some Twitter debates just in the last couple of days where, there's this video of this woman saying, "Oh, it's been proven that there's no such thing as, asymptomatic spread, and this is all, stop being so fearful. You're a bunch of sheep," and all this stuff. And even in my own MAGA family, there is spirited group chats about, how come nobody's dying of the flu? It must be people are dying of the flu and they're just mislabeling them and all this kind of stuff. And I said to them, come on, this is my brother. He's very, very MAGA. And he gets his news from various different sources. And I said, Peter, do you think the entire world, the whole developed world, is in on this squad Bill Gates conspiracy? You think China, Singapore, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, like they're all being duped into thinking that COVID's real when it's really just a light cold? And but yet, like, I couldn't convince him, because he was like, well, I read this article that less people died, and on and on. So I agree with you, Josh. That would have been one of my surprises too. Like, it used to be, I thought, like infrastructure, public health, even foreign policy, those are the areas where there was huge overlap between the parties. Steve, you remember the good old days where you just argue over like abortion and gun rights?
Oh, yeah. Boy, if there was a time where we had at least some facts that we would agree on, and then we'd go off. I mean, but I do think that what I and others often call Trumpism, what is Trumpism, right? Trumpism, the mask kerfuffle that Josh, I think, wisely brings up, I'm glad he brought it up, is really a microcosm of what Trumpism actually is, as I've seen a few folks mention, is contrarianism. Mm-hmm. I mean, basically, if you are trying to connect with the 40 to 47% of Americans who are on some level good with Trump, then the worst thing you could do to try to convince the lion's share of that group that an idea is a good one is to have an, quote, expert back you up. So it is the most anti-establishment in that it's worse than anti-establishment. It's anti-authority, it's anti-expertise, it's anti-knowledge, it's contrarianism. So like when Dr. Fauci says, hey, it's a good idea, you should wear masks. And they're like, well, if he said it, then screw it. And it's like, well, where I'm from, growing up, one of the most powerful arguments in debate, in formal debate, is when you back up an assertion with third-party validation of people with credentials that in most times we would say provide a credibility to an argument. Like, it's sort of like, I mean, this is why ex-football players are the color commentators almost all the time in football games, because you've got the play-by-play guy who's some stiff who went to broadcasting school, and now he, 3rd and 5 from the 27, and that's what he does. And then, so what do we do to provide credibility? We have an ex-football player say, all right, so watch him cut back and get in the hole and get 7 yards on that play. And when it's an ex-running back, we go, okay, it must be true. A former NFL running back would obviously be the best person, or like an offensive lineman or something. But instead, this is the equivalent in sort of this contrarianism. This is a big group of Trump people that are like, all right, so you got a physician telling me that we should wear a mask? Why the F am I going to listen to a physician? I'm like, well, who else? And they're like, the internet. And I'm like, all right, well, there you go. My cousin Fred said that you shouldn't wear a mask. And all of a sudden, you're equating like a physician with your cousin at Thanksgiving who said he saw somewhere that somebody told him. That's where we're at. So for 40 to 47% of the country, the mask represented authority, expertise, somebody who's smarter, who has letters at the end of their name or a doctor in front of their name. I mean, look what they're doing to Jill Biden. Oh, Dr. Jill Biden. Like, you waited. I mean, I love it. All these guys were rooting for Julius Erving, Dr. J. They're all wearing Dr. Scholl's, like they're watching Doctor Who. But now Dr. Jill Biden actually got a doctorate, and they're like, that's not real, because they're already trying to chop it down as a contrarianism thing. It's degrading the Republican Party in a way that is unbelievably embarrassing and is not good for the long-term future of the country.
But I think it also speaks to a good portion of America's distrust of the government or anything that is considered the establishment or expertise because of various different reasons. Maybe they felt left out, or the Tuskegee, what was that experiment? That's a good example of maybe a certain portion of America not trusting the government. Progressives, Trump supporters not feeling they're getting anything back despite putting taxes in, working hard all their lives, so feeling left behind.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, there's absolutely distrust in the what some would call the globalist elite establishment. I was in a debate with someone else. I went to school. I grew up in northern New Jersey in a pretty conservative part, so I have a lot of friends that are still very much pro MAGA. And we were debating about masks, and I was like, here's a report from Harvard Medical School on the importance of containment, and they were like, oh, so you trust Harvard? And I'm like, well, there's a bunch of people that have been studying science and stuff for a while there. And I think they would know a little more about epidemiology and public health and viruses than whatever they're listening to in kind of like the alt-right Breitbart kind of podcast. But it immediately, I was like, look, here's the report, read this, it'll explain the power of mitigation. And it backfired completely. They were like, see, even Harvard says it, so we're definitely not going to do that.
Well, I mean, I stopped doing it finally, but earlier this year, on COVID-related Facebook threads, talk about stepping in dog poop on purpose. I mean, you get in these threads, and people would be like, "Well, you know what? It's no worse than the average flu," and it's like, well, actually. And the numbers varied a little bit, but it's between 10 and 20 times more deadly than the average annual flu, which is to say it's pretty bad. And obviously for people above a certain age, it's incredibly risky. Tom, I think we've talked about before, I lost my mother-in-law at the end of July from COVID, and almost lost my father-in-law as well. We're at a point now where 1 out of every 1,000 Americans has died of COVID this year, and it's not over yet. But I would link to data. I would make a cogent argument that involved punctuation and capital letters. And, it wasn't like texting, you up. It's not like, I mean, it was like, I was being thoughtful. And then the response back would be like, why are you talking down to me? And I'm like, I'm not talking down to you. I'm just like, you said something that's not true. And I didn't want to just be an ass and just say, yeah. So I actually respect you enough that I felt compelled to show you my work. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not expecting you to believe me just because Steve says it on Facebook. Here's my homework, because I actually respect that you deserve, like, it's the opposite. And yet it was perceived as, all right, smarty pants. And I'm like, all right, where do you go with that? Like, yeah. Would you like it if I called you a bad name? Like, would that somehow make this better? But that's kind of where we're at. And the mask, boy, that if you needed a match to light the dry hay. The dry hay is sitting all around us, and that and a few other things this year, really. And Trump, of course, was dousing gasoline on any hay he could find all year. And by the way, politically speaking, it almost worked. He came really close to winning. I mean, oh, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. All right, now let's Steve, get on to your second observation, and then we're going to go into predictions for the future. I do want to acknowledge people who are supporting this content through our channel membership program. So if you're on YouTube, feel free to hit that join button, and you can help support more content and help us grow this channel, because obviously we are a little channel on YouTube, but doing my best to bring more data and kind of evidence to these conversations. So first of all, thank you, Kristen Slevin, our EVP, highest level member. And then we're going to go to our next level, our vice presidents, V Lamb, JM Sap, Fat Lamb, Soldier One, Laura Lane, Joshua Frick, Patrick Dunn, and Boyce from Mindful Skeptics. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then we're going to go to the next level down, which is a hardcore. And we've got Mike, Gene, David, Tracy, DK, Landline, Phoenix, Jackalego, Kirsch, Mr. History Fan, Byram, Mona, Susan, Yang, Robert, Dean, and Stat Nerd. And then at the entry level, but still very much appreciated, are our verified nerds. Helen, Lisa, Sugar, Albert, Brandon, Yes, Brian, Peter, Arez, Hitachi, Your Maman, Jedwiga, Sophia, Gail, Shake and Make, Mike, Doris, Emerald, Nell, Lori, Ben. What happened? That skipped. Hold on. Ben, Roger, Lisa, Christina, Vaughn, Tony, Rasta, Ryan, Jessica, Blair Walsingham, Bike, James, Jalopy, Aaron, Emma, Joel, Spirited, KM, Hui, Stephen, Ira, and Shoni. So thank you all for supporting the Nerds for Humanity content. All the money goes to promoting the channel and supporting the costs of accessing data or podcast hosting fees. By the way, if you like audio podcasts, you can subscribe to us there too.
Yang Gang 2020. Yang Gang 2020. Yang Gang 2020. Yang Gang. Yeah, yeah. Yang Gang 2020.